chosen ones. You were never meant to blend into the crowd, never designed to be forgotten in the endless noise of history. You were placed here in this moment because the heavens themselves are unveiling a path reserved for a very specific few. There are signs in the air that money cannot buy, yet wealth itself bows to them. The whispers of kings and the silence of generals have begun to point toward the same truth. Something is being prepared for you, and tonight the gates of perception are opening wider than ever before. The richest man alive does not speak often. When he does, the world trembles not because of the money he commands, but because of the secrets hidden in that fortune. Nations disguise themselves in flags, but vaults reveal their truth. His message is not one that can be heard in boardrooms or reported on by news anchors. It carries an ancient pulse, an energy woven into creation itself, reaching for those with ears to listen and eyes to see. Why would a man who has everything still feel the weight of prophecy pressing on his chest? Why does he move in shadows when every spotlight craves his presence? Those questions linger like a storm on the horizon. Perhaps he is less a man and more a vessel, his riches serving as a mirror of something that cannot be measured in gold or silver. There are vaults that hold more than money. There are ledgers that balance more than numbers. There is wealth that can never be stolen, and he knows where it flows. This message is not for the world, but for you. You will not hear it in the marketplace, nor will it be announced by governments. It is carried in frequencies, encoded in time, waiting for the chosen to notice its rhythm. A billionaire's voice becomes nothing more than an echo if you cannot discern the sound beneath it. That sound is awakening now. The city never noticed when his lights stayed on through the night. While most drifted into dreams, his mind was already awake in corridors the public would never see. They called him the richest man alive, yet wealth was not his addiction. It was the current that flowed beneath it. There was something restless in him, something that could not find peace in comfort, no matter how many zeros lined his accounts. Even as his towers reached into the clouds, he was searching for a signal no stock market could register. Insiders whispered about meetings held at hours when the sky turned silent. Entire trading floors shifted because of his unseen hand, yet the movements were too precise to be accidents. It was as if he carried knowledge of tomorrow before the sun ever broke the horizon. He did not sleep, not because of insomnia, but because sleep would have been too small a space for the visions that pressed upon him. The dream lived in his waking hours, and he bore its weight like an unrelenting storm. There were guards posted at every entrance to his estate, yet the greatest protection was not steel or firepower. It was secrecy. Rooms designed without windows, walls reinforced to keep sound from spilling out, and archives so encrypted they resembled vaults within vaults. Still, every action seemed less about protection and more about shielding something yet to be revealed. The man who never slept carried an unease that no fortune could erase. Those closest to him said his eyes carried the look of someone who knew more than he was permitted to speak. When questioned, he deflected with a smile, but in moments of silence the mask fell. His silence spoke of prophecies, of an inheritance that extended beyond the reach of gold. It was as though he was living on borrowed time, not from banks, but from destiny itself. The world could not comprehend why a man who already held everything kept pushing into territories beyond comprehension. Satellites tracked his movements. Governments recorded his transactions. but they never captured the essence of what he sought. He was not building an empire for the sake of history books. He was preparing something else, something that pulsed with a rhythm outside of ordinary time. Behind the numbers and the headlines, there were layers of wealth that could never be broadcast. The cameras caught the mansions, the jets, the yachts gliding across seas as though he commanded oceans. Yet, those were the distractions, the surface-level illusions built for the public eye. What mattered was hidden beneath, in the vaults only he could access, where ledgers did not simply record transactions, but encoded mysteries older than money itself. Those who attempted to trace his fortune found gaps, trails that ended in shadows. No tax audit, no banking authority, no investigative journalist could ever uncover the true depth of what he carried. It was not simply hidden, it was designed to be invisible. There were artifacts purchased at auctions, but never delivered to galleries. Documents older than nations themselves sat untouched, yet preserved, as if waiting for a moment beyond this age. Gold mined from forgotten lands disappeared into accounts that bore no name. But behind each transfer was a signal, a vibration only the wise could recognize. When empires collapsed, fragments of their legacy slipped into his grasp, and he stored them not as trophies but as keys. Keys to what? No one dared to ask. Networks attempted to frame him as eccentric, but the truth went deeper. Each acquisition followed a pattern invisible to ordinary eyes. He moved wealth like a grand chessboard, aligning pieces that governments couldn't even admit existed. It was not about profit, it was about alignment, preparing a treasury that extended beyond material substance. Some said he understood frequencies. Some whispered he had touched energy fields hidden in vaults beneath the earth. Others claimed he had read books that vanished from history, texts that spoke of power that flowed when spirit and matter intertwined. The reason none of this ever appeared on television was simple. The public was not meant to see. The true story would break minds conditioned to believe wealth was only about accumulation. For him, fortune was a vessel, carrying codes meant to unlock something that money itself could not purchase. Every dollar, every transfer, every hidden vault was aligned with a larger rhythm, like notes in a song not yet revealed. And in the silence of his estate, away from the cameras, he would pause before these secrets as though they were alive, as though they were speaking to him, urging him to prepare for the moment when the hidden would no longer remain unseen. It was not in a palace or a cathedral where the encounter began, but in a quiet chamber hidden beneath layers of reinforced stone. The richest man alive sat across from an ancient scroll, its surface worn with age, its ink faded but still breathing with power. He had spent fortunes acquiring treasures, but this was different. This was not purchased. It had been led to him, arriving in his possession as if guided by unseen hands. The moment his eyes scanned the words, his heart carried a weight unlike any he had ever known. It was as if wealth itself bowed before what was written. The scroll spoke of times when kings would tremble and empires would fail, when the chosen would rise carrying an inheritance not of silver or gold, but of spirit. He traced the words slowly, feeling the pulse of something beyond history. Among the lines was a whisper of Yeshua, not in the way preachers repeat it on stages, but in the way a voice echoes in the silence of the soul. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt. The phrase surfaced in his memory. and suddenly his billions felt like dust compared to the weight of the truth unfolding before him. Why would this message come to him, the one who already carried the world's fortune? Why would prophecy intertwine itself with finance, as though numbers and spirit shared the same bloodstream? The questions haunted him, but they also drove him deeper. He realized wealth was not the end, but the carrier. Money had become the language through which the unseen was writing its script. That night, he could not escape the sound of the words. Every vault seemed to hum with the echo of that scroll. Every investment appeared less about gain and more about preparation. He began to see threads connecting his past decisions, the acquisitions, the transfers, the hidden artifacts. It was as though an invisible hand had been moving him into place, and only now was he beginning to see the design. The corridors beneath the city stretched like veins of steel and stone, hidden from the public eye, yet pulsing with the wealth of nations. Inside these fortified chambers sat treasures so vast they could tilt economies with a single movement. And yet, in one unforgettable night, something occurred that even the architects of power could not explain. The richest man alive entered a vault that had never been breached, and when he spoke, the silence cracked. His words carried no threat, no command, yet the air shifted as if the walls themselves understood his presence. The guards watching swore the ground gave a low vibration, though no earthquake was recorded. The metallic doors hummed with a faint resonance, as though responding to the cadence of his voice. It was not loud, nor was it theatrical. His tone was calm, deliberate, but it carried an authority that machines could not resist. Instruments flickered, sensors misread, and data streams faltered for reasons no technician could diagnose. For a fleeting moment, it was as if human speech had awakened something buried in the alloys and circuitry. Those who stood nearby would later struggle to describe what they felt. Some said the pressure in the room increased, as if they were submerged in deep water. Others whispered they saw light glimmer along the steel edges, a fleeting shimmer like liquid fire crawling across the vault. Whatever it was, it left them uneasy, questioning whether they had witnessed technology malfunction or a force beyond their comprehension. The man himself remained quiet, as though expecting this reaction, as though he had known the vault would respond. He placed his hand on the cold surface, and the hum settled into silence. What he had triggered was not random. It was aligned with a rhythm he alone seemed to understand, yet he gave no explanation, leaving the others to drown in speculation. From that night forward, whispers spread among the security detail. They claimed the vaults were alive in his presence, that the steel and stone became more than mere storage. They said his voice unlocked patterns that no engineer could replicate. Whether true or not, the rumor grew stronger, and so did the mystery of what he truly carried within him. There are moments when words slip out unplanned, moments when a man speaks from a place deeper than his own knowledge. The richest man alive was known for silence, for calculated pauses and carefully measured statements. Yet in one private gathering, as leaders and financiers leaned in to catch every syllable, he spoke a phrase that did not belong to the language of economics or policy. It was a sentence lifted from a well of memory older than his own lifetime, and it silenced the room instantly. He had been addressing the future of markets, outlining strategies that could alter the tides of nations, when suddenly his voice shifted. Without warning, he said, "For what shall it profit a man, if he shall gain the whole world, and lose his own soul. The air tightened, and though some brushed it off as metaphor, others felt the words land with a weight their spirits could not deny. It was not the type of message billionaires were supposed to deliver, yet it rang truer than the charts and numbers they had gathered to hear. Later, when asked about it, he dismissed it with a smile, saying he had read it once long ago. But those present knew better. It was not quoted like an intellectual reference. It was spoken like a confession, like a truth pressed into his being by an unseen hand. The reminder of Yeshua did not fit the man they thought they knew. Yet in that moment, his wealth seemed to dissolve, replaced by something far more unshakable. The echo of those words traveled beyond the room. Within hours, whispers spread through networks of power, unsettling those who measured their worth in gold and influence. Why would a man who had everything pause to remind the world of the fragility of the soul? Why would he risk unsettling markets with a phrase that pulled the ground from beneath material certainty? Perhaps he did not speak for the world at all. Perhaps the words were never meant for the powerful sitting across from him, but for someone else listening from afar. A hidden audience. A chosen audience. The kind who could hear a whisper from ages past and recognize it as a signal. In the digital realm, movements of money are mapped like constellations across the night sky. Banks, governments, and intelligence agencies watch these trails with precision, tracking every signal, every code, every transfer. Yet, on one particular evening, when the richest man alive shifted a fraction of his fortune, the satellites that monitored global finance registered something they had never encountered before. It began as a ripple, a surge of numbers moving in ways no algorithm could predict. The transfer did not move through traditional channels, yet it reached every system as though carried by an unseen current. Satellites linked to major economies should have tracked the data flow seamlessly, but instead, their feeds blinked into silence. Whole sectors of spaceborne eyes turned blind for minutes at a time, not by malfunction, but by something beyond technology's grasp. Engineers scrambled to recalibrate, believing interference was to blame. Analysts combed through logs, searching for a trace of intrusion, yet the reports returned blank, as if the event had been erased in real time. The silence of those satellites was not a blackout, it was a pause, as though the very heavens had leaned in to listen. Within intelligence circles, whispers began. Could one man move wealth with such magnitude that it interrupted the watchers of the skies? Or had the transfer triggered a resonance, an echo that rippled beyond circuits and into frequencies not yet understood? No one could explain how the satellites lost sight, nor why they reactivated moments later with no errors logged. The man himself made no announcement, no acknowledgement. To him, it was merely a step, another alignment in a chain of movements orchestrated long before the world noticed. His focus was not on the balance sheets or the blinking screens of satellites. His focus was on the rhythm beneath the numbers, the pulse that told him he was still on course. Yet, those who caught the silence could not forget it. In a world where information was controlled, catalogued, and archived, an unexplained gap was more dangerous than data itself. Something had shifted in the unseen realm of wealth, and the watchers in orbit had no choice but to remain silent. The halls of the treasury are built on certainty. Every cent tracked, every movement explained, every ledger balanced to the smallest fraction. It is a fortress of numbers, a cathedral of accountability. But one night, certainty fractured, screens lit up with alerts, transfers that appeared yet left no trail, balances shifting without a source or destination. Officials whispered of an invisible transfer, a movement of wealth too vast to be hidden, yet too precise to be captured. No bank claimed it, no government authorized it. Still, the numbers aligned perfectly, as if guided by a hand that did not obey the codes of finance. Panic crept into the room as men and women who had spent lifetimes mapping flows of money realized they were staring at something unexplainable. Attempts to trace it back led only to blank space, as though the data had walked into a corridor and never returned. Meetings convened in secret chambers, doors sealed, voices hushed. Was it a hack? An act of war? A new technology no one had seen before? Yet every answer failed. The systems were intact, the firewalls unbroken, and still, billions had moved without leaving a single fingerprint. It was as if wealth had decided to move itself. The richest man alive, when questioned, simply smiled. He neither confirmed nor denied. His silence became the loudest answer of all, unsettling those who lived on control. For in that silence lay the possibility that wealth could obey a rhythm higher than law, higher than mathematics, higher than the grasp of governments. The invisible transfer was not theft. It was alignment, though none of the officials dared to use such a word. Reports were buried, files sealed with layers of classification. To admit what had happened would be to admit weakness, and the Treasury could not afford to appear blind. But inside those sealed walls, the whispers grew louder. There was talk of frequencies, of codes older than finance, of movements that had more in common with prophecy than accounting. There are some who believe gold is nothing more than a mineral, a metal mined from the earth and pressed into bars. But those who have studied deeper know it carries resonance, a frequency that hums beneath the surface, a vibration that aligns with the human spirit. The richest man alive understood this truth not from science alone, but from experience. He had stood in vaults where gold was stacked higher than the eye could measure, and in that silence, he felt it speak, not with words, but with a pulse, as though it remembered something older than nations. In one such vault, he brought no accountants, no advisors, only himself. He walked between the rows, listening. It was there he realized wealth was not about possession, but about alignment. The frequency of gold was not calling to his hands, but to his soul. And in that moment, a memory stirred within him, a fragment of a voice from long ago. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The words of Yeshua rose unbidden, like an echo carried through time. He froze. It was not the kind of phrase he expected in the heart of a vault, yet there it was, cutting through the silence sharper than any blade. It was not rebuke, nor was it comfort. It was revelation. The gold itself became a mirror, showing him the weight he carried and the truth it pointed toward. Billions stored in hidden chambers meant nothing if his heart remained unanchored to the eternal. The hum of the gold did not invite greed, but reminded him that true treasure could never be locked away. Still, he could not walk away. He lingered, hands brushing the cold surfaces, feeling the vibration travel through him like a current. He wondered if every transfer he had ever made, every hidden ledger, every acquisition, was merely positioning him to hear this moment. Perhaps the gold was never his at all. Perhaps it had been waiting, preserved, holding a memory that only now could be released. The vault did not answer his questions. It only continued to hum, low and steady, as though it carried a prophecy not yet spoken aloud. And as he left the chamber, he could not silence the words that followed him into the night. When whispers of power escape the walls of finance, they do not drift aimlessly. They find their way into the ears of those tasked with watching the world. Deep inside, secured rooms where analysts piece together fragments of intelligence, the richest man alive's words were catalogued, dissected, and replayed. No speech of his ever went unnoticed, and one particular address drew more attention than any other. He had spoken softly, not to the world stage, but in a closed circle. Yet the Pentagon still obtained a transcript. What unsettled them was not what he said about markets, but what lingered between the lines. His words carried patterns that analysts could not dismiss. Phrases that seemed ordinary on the surface resonated in strange ways, aligning with signals the defense networks had detected but never understood. They ran his sentences through encryption models, searching for codes, hidden layers, anything to explain why the cadence of his speech unsettled machines as much as it unsettled men. The results came back inconclusive, but the unease remained. It was as though his voice carried a frequency that could not be translated but only felt. Reports were compiled, delivered up the chain, landing on the desks of generals who prided themselves on having answers for everything. Yet, this time, no one spoke. The Pentagon noted the event carefully, marked it with priority, but issued no response. They did not dismiss it, nor did they act upon it. They simply recorded, sealed the file, and stored it in the silent archives reserved for phenomena without explanation. Those who worked the night shift in those secure corridors never forgot the look in their supervisor's eyes. It was not fear, but recognition. Recognition that the richest man alive was speaking a language they had not been trained to understand, a language that bypassed strategy and entered something deeper. His wealth was not what troubled them. It was his alignment with forces invisible to satellites and beyond the scope of military doctrine. And so the file sat untouched, buried beneath layers of secrecy. Yet, even in silence, the event echoed, spreading through the halls like an unseen current. The richest man alive had always spoken in fragments, words scattered like pieces of a puzzle no one could assemble. But on one night, close to midnight, he released something different. Not to the press, not to the world markets, not even to his inner circle of advisors. It came quietly, transmitted through channels meant to vanish once received, a message that seemed less like strategy and more like prophecy. Those who first read it said it was written with a weight that could not be mistaken. There was no urgency in his phrasing, yet every line carried the gravity of finality. It was as if he knew the hourglass was almost empty, and the sands were slipping faster than anyone realized. He did not speak of numbers or accounts. He spoke of inheritance, of something waiting beyond the reach of vaults and banks. His fortune, he wrote, was only a shadow of what truly mattered. And then came the line that silenced even the most skeptical. Lay your foundations not in what fades, but in what cannot be taken away. The words bore the unmistakable echo of Yeshua. The reminder that treasure was never meant to rest in metal or stone, but in spirit. The message was not addressed to governments, nor to markets, but to an unseen audience, to those who had ears to hear. It was not advice, it was a summons. Midnight drew closer, and with it came a weight pressing into the hearts of those who stumbled upon his message. The Pentagon recorded it, The Treasury archived it, and intelligence agencies flagged it, but none dared to respond. To answer would be to admit that wealth had bowed before something greater, that a man who held the material world in his hands had chosen instead to speak of eternity. The message ended without signature, without seal, without a single clue of its intended recipient. Yet those who read it felt it was not meant for them. It was meant for someone else, someone outside their circles of power, someone whose very existence had been traced through prophecy.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.